And now let us begin our first plenary session 3. And the plenary session 3 will be held under the theme of healing and reconciliation for peace on the Korean Peninsula. And this session will highlight the importance of psychological healing and community restoration going beyond institutional approaches to peace. And for that, we are honored to begin a keynote address by Archbishop Kim Hee-jung, who has long dedicated himself to promoting peace on the Korean Peninsula. And following the keynote, many of you may be familiar with the best-selling author of the Wide and Shallow Knowledge for Intellectual Conversation, Mr. Choi Sa-jang, who will join us as discussant. Together, they will explore the values of healing, solidarity, and human dignity. Please welcome them with a big round of applause. So now I will hand over the microphone to Mr. Tae. The floor is yours. Hello, good morning. Good to see you. Thank you very much for inviting me. I am Choi Sa-jang, the author. And I believe we don't have that much time. We will begin now, and we will finish at 12 o'clock. And so there will be a lot being talked today. And so first we will be listening to the keynote speech of Archbishop Kim, and then we will have a Q&A session. And it might be a pity if I'm the only one asking the questions, so we will be getting also questions from you as well. So there are some personal questions that I have included for the talk. And also there are some personal opinions that I have added, but that might not be enough. So after I ask all my questions, the audience will also have the opportunity to take part in the Q&A session. And I don't think I have to do a long introduction. So first of all, I would like to introduce Archbishop Mr. Kim, who is long honored in our society, and let us have an in-depth discussion. So first of all, Archbishop Kim, we will be listening to your keynote speech. What I'd like us to reflect on today is under the broad theme of transitioning to peaceful coexistence in the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia, with a more specific focus on healing and reconciliation for peace on the Korean Peninsula. We all know very well that peace on the Korean Peninsula cannot be achieved in isolation from peace in Northeast Asia. Most of you who are here have heard of the butterfly effect, I suppose. It is the idea that the small flutter of a butterfly's wings in the Amazon jungle can eventually cause a storm far away in the United States. In other words, a minor change in one place can bring about unpredictable consequences elsewhere. And that is how the modern society is organically interconnected, constantly influencing one another. And in that sense, peace on the Korean Peninsula is inseparably linked not only to peace in Northeast Asia, but ultimately to peace in the entire world. Some might say that for healing and reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula, we first need to clearly identify the causes of the wounds. That is also true. But if we get caught up in blaming each other over who caused those wounds, wouldn't we risk making them even deeper and more painful? Instead of immediately digging into the causes and reality of the wounds, could we not first search for common ground that leads us toward peace? And by working together on those shared goals, allow the wounds to heal naturally along the way. I would like to give an example from the Korean Christian history. Until the Second Vatican Council in 1962, relations between the Catholics and the Protestants in Korea were extremely hostile. But after the Second Vatican Council, as the two churches often worked together for Korea's democratization movement and the recovery of human rights, opportunities to meet increased and mutual understanding deepened. With mutual respect and understanding as the foundation, they were now able to exchange views on theological differences without prejudice. We Koreans still carry the deep wound of the Korean War, a fratricidal conflict. Around the time of liberation on August 15, 1945, our national community was divided by foreign powers along different ideologies and political systems. And many of those caught up in this division came from the so-called leadership and intellectual class. In fact, ordinary people were less concerned with ideology or political theory. What they wanted was simply to live peaceful, everyday lives. Through my own experience serving in the Vietnam War, I saw firsthand how devastating war is and how it reduces human beings to something less than human. And this is why I believe that whatever the cost, we must prevent war and pursue peace. Unless we break the vicious cycle of violence and revenge, we can never achieve peace. The renowned British historian Edward Gibbon wrote in his book, The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, that the happiest time in human history was during the era of the five good emperors, when the Roman Empire enjoyed what was called the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace. He writes that that was the Roman peace era. But in reality, that so-called Roman peace was merely a forced silence imposed by military conquest over surrounding states so that they would never dare to resist again. And that silence imposed by force was soon broken when Germanic tribes and other surrounding peoples rose up again, leading to the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. In fact, peace is not simply the absence of war. It cannot be reduced to a fragile balance between hostile powers, nor can it be born out of authoritarian rule. And to put it clearly, peace is the work of justice. And creating an environment where justice can truly be realized is also an essential task in building peace, and it must be pursued with respect for the universal values of humanity. I hope that for our national community to coexist and live peacefully, we will work together on shared concerns, and in doing so, naturally create an environment where the wounds of division can be healed and reconciliation can take root. A practical way toward healing and the very foundation of reconciliation is above all the building of trust. I have visited North Korea many times, and what I felt was that, and what I also heard from them was trust. They said they don't believe in South Korea. It's because North Korea had a single leader maintaining its regime for many decades, having consistent policies, but in South Korea, whenever the leaders changed, the policies changed accordingly. That is why they did not have any trust towards the South. We must refrain from any careless words or expressions that could undermine trust between us. And I hope that through reconciliation within our own nation, we can harness our strength to help neighboring countries in need. Both North and South can do it with our own strength. Peace has been both an ideal and a guiding principle of our people since the very beginning of our history, which is more than 5,000 years ago. This is also in line with the 홍익 인간, which means benefiting all mankind. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your insightful lecture. Your writing is really amazing, and reconciliation and recovery and trust building, that was a point from your keynote speech. We should not blame others, but we have to understand each other. And the first priority is to set a common goal so that we can work together. Well, while listening to your lecture, I felt like it was kind of difficult for me because these days, younger generation are more worried about their living instead of having a good relationship with others. Me too. Actually, while thinking about what to talk about today, I was like, what can I talk about, because I'm not that interested in this issue. And peace felt like it's a faraway story for me. So in that sense, your story of recovery, value of recovery and reconciliation was more meaningful. And actually, because like I told you that it didn't sound like I am the person who needs this recovery or reconciliation. I think through the discussion we will be able to truly understand what you meant. So today I have a few questions. Well, I was given with a few questions regarding unification from the public. Well, there could be some people who are not interested at all in unification, or some people might be very interested in unification because they feel like it is essential for the Korean Peninsula. So I think I will start from a little bit easier question because we're all nervous. So, beginning with my Q&A session, I would like to ask you, how have you been? So you recently retired in 2022, and through your interview, I saw that after your retirement, you said you felt very fresh, and I heard that you are in Isil village and was having a good time there. And actually, it's hard for ordinary people like me to imagine what do you do and what kind of lifestyle you have after your retirement.
게으름을 즐기고
Well,
있습니다.
I'm enjoying my laziness.
이제까지 짜여진 일정에 따라서 그냥 움직였는데
Until now, I had to
게으름을 즐기고 있고
do and live
주로 저술
according to my official schedule.
또 외부에서
But now
초빙
I
요청이
don't have
있으면
to. So
나가서
sometimes if there is any
종교에
lecture
대해서
request,
강의도
I try to
하고
give
그렇습니다.
lectures
제
and I also
전공분야는
write.
역사입니다.
Well,
교회 역사.
my major lecture part is history. I heard that your book was published recently. Oh yes, it is about a social doctrine. So it is an extract from my thesis. And as an archbishop, there is an archbishop who had to be exiled to somewhere else. So I wanted to talk about his story. And actually, long ago, it was actually not easy to mention about slavery, and I wanted to also include that story as well. In the Bible long ago, slaves and animals were regarded as the same creature, but this archbishop in my book was the person who insisted to free slaves. He was the one who told people to educate these slaves and to give some technology transfer to these slaves so that they can be freed. And that was about him. I see. So he was the person who did a lot of social work. Okay. So I want to add on to your comments. Do you also enjoy watching, do you also enjoy social media? Yes, I do. I love to do my social media, so I try not to look at it so often. Well, that's quite different from my expectation. So, up until now, I know that you've been doing a lot of charity work and also you've been doing a lot of social activities. And you served as a leader of a certain religion and you made a lot of achievements as well. And you've been working hard for the minority as well, and you also paid attention to the climate issues and environmental issues, as well as the two Koreas issue. So my question is this. So looking back to your achievements and your activities that you've done while you were serving as the Archbishop, what was the most memorable activities that you remember? Well, actually, members of the church are also ordinary citizens, just as members of society, right?
분리할 수는 없다고 생각합니다.
So religion certainly has its unique realm, but very often it overlaps with social matters. In many cases, religious concerns and social issues can be distinguished, but they cannot truly be separated.
개입해야 되지 않겠는가? 도덕적,
So especially when events occur that go against the universal values of humanity, as a religious leader, I could not remain silent.
농민운동을
For
하면서
example, the case of farmer Baeknam-gi, who tragically died after excessive use of police water cannons during a protest,
저는 참을 수가 없었습니다.
I was
그래서
not
제가 거리에 나서서
able to remain silent.
부당한 공권력의 행포다.
So I had to speak up,
하면서 그 백남기 농민을
and I went
농민에 대해서
forward to talk about him,
아주 안타깝게 생각하고 우리나라 농업 정책을
but I feel
다시
really sad
재정비할 수
about
있도록
him.
한다고
And
제가 촉구한 바.
I also called for awareness at the time.
그런 기억이 많이 나오셨군요. 그러니까
Okay, I
어느
understand.
순간부터 시민들의 요구가 그런 게 된 것 같습니다. 종교는 종교로
So, religion
사회가
is just a religion. This is the overall perception of the public,
영향을 주고받아서는 안 되는 것이
and
타당하다라고 생각하는 사람들이
we should not be influenced by a certain religion. But you mean there is an overlapping part between religion and society, right? So you had a sense of conscience and you were not able to maintain silence when you saw something that looked like it was fair. It was not fair. So I remember, I think it was 2017 when you visited with as an envoy of President Moon Jae-in, and you also visited Vatican. And could you share about that a little bit with us?
그때 거기 트럼프 대통령하고 그 김정은 위원장하고
Of course.
서로 누구의 핵 버튼이 더
Well,
큰가?
as a special envoy of the president to the Holy See, I delivered President Moon Jae-in's personal letter just one day before President Donald Trump's visit to the Vatican. At the time, the tension was escalating.
우리 정부의
So at the time,
의하면은 트럼프 대통령이 프란체스코 교황을
as far as I remember,
소식을 듣고
I heard that Trump was gonna visit
트럼프
the
대통령이
Pope.
교황을
So
우리 정부의
what I and President Moon Jae-in wanted to do was to convey our message and visit the Pope.
바라는 뜻으로
And through that letter, our government conveyed its intention to seek peace on the Korean Peninsula. Well, at the time, I was actually having a meeting in India, but the next morning I departed to Vatican, and I arrived at like 6 in the morning in the airport, and then I went to Rome after coming back to Korea, and directly after that I flew to Rome,
국무성 장관을 만나서
and there
정부의
I
의견을
met
충분히 전달했습니다.
ministers
설명을 하고
of the United States, and I
장관이
gave this special letter to
대통령의 친서도 전달하고 우리 정부가
the United States, and
대화를 재개할 수 있으면 좋겠다라는 의견을
also
전달했습니다. 그래서 그 뒤로
I asked
들린 바로는
I also I conveyed our government's intention to seek peace, and also what I heard was that the Pope also said to President Trump that it would be good if we can resolve the current tension through dialogue. And
제
I also heard that the Pope offered his prayer and meditation for both inter-Korean dialogue. And since then, as far as I know, President Trump decided to have dialogue with the two Koreas, and it led to the North Korea and the US summit.
여기서 무지한 질문 하나 좀 개인적으로 그냥
And I might sound a little bit ignorant, but I have another question. So, is that letter was in an envelope? So, are you able to open it on yourself? Yes, actually, I can, because it was not sealed.
몰래 이렇게 한번 열어보시는 거군요.
Also, did you open it? Yes, because I thought I had to read that letter in order to tell the message well. So, well, it's a long story. But usually when there is a summit, high-level talks, it's supposed to happen with a few months of preparation. So at the time, I called the U.S. and I called the person who was working in the Vatican, and he gave me the opportunity to meet the Secretary of the State. So I met this guy, Secretary of the State, and I was telling him, so this is the position of our South Korean government, and we were actually scheduled to meet about 15 minutes, but our conversation lasted for longer than like 50 minutes. So we talked a lot, and
트럼프 대통령과 프란체스코 교황 만났을 때 그 외교장관 대주교가 배석했었는데
also I heard that those people who heard my story told President Trump about our story. Like, there is one archbishop who came from Korea, and he gave me this message like this. That is very interesting.
So we'll talk about this story a little bit later again. I will be asking other questions about that story. And before that, let us talk about dialogue and peace. So I would like to give you a couple of questions about that, and then we can talk a little bit more about specific cases. So I would like to ask you about the concept of peace, because going beyond religion, you have devoted yourself not only to religion but also to the peace and well-being of the nation, civil society, and the world. And over this long journey, I would like to ask, how do you understand the concept of peace, and what does it look like in concrete terms? Because to people talk about peace based on force, and we don't know any other kind of peace. So I was wondering, what is the concept of peace, and how does peace look like concretely? Yes. So do you know what this word peace in Korean means? It means getting together, gathering, mingling, to be balanced, to be in harmony. That is the Korean meaning of peace. It is to be in harmony, living in harmony. And it means respecting differences and respecting each other and getting together. Because sometimes we say that if something's different, that is wrong. It is not wrong, it is just different many times. If you look at all those flowers in the garden, when they're all together, it becomes a beautiful garden. They look different, they have different colors, they have different sizes. All those flowers are in harmony, and then we see a beautiful garden. Because the colors are different, it does not mean that a certain color is wrong. Think about the orchestra. They have all different sounds. And all those different instruments are put in one place, and they are in harmony, creating beautiful music and
우리
sound.
사회도 그래야 되지 않겠는가?
Our society should be just like
우리는
that.
대화하는 데 있어서 내 의견과 다른 것은
When we converse with others and when others have different opinions, then we think that person is wrong. We have that kind of a prejudice. So rather than having that kind of a prejudice, let us think that that person is just different. If we would converse in that way, our conversations would be much better.
제가 종교간 대화를 한 20여 년 했습니다.
And I have been
한국에는 7대 종교가 있습니다.
in Korea, as you know, there are 7 religions.
종교간 대화를 하면서 원칙을 제가
And I used to have conversations based on
상대방의
respect. I also had these principles that I
건드리지 말자.
will not touch upon those core principles of other religions. I shall respect the other leaders, the other religions.
소중하게 생각하는 종교의 핵심을 우리가
I shall respect those important principles of the other party's religion, and I shall
다른
respect them.
종교라는 표현을 쓰지 말고
And I shall not say other
영어로
religion, but say religion of our neighbors.
합의했습니다.
So that's how we agreed upon, and that is how I've been doing the conversations. So when I went to Vatican, I said that we don't use the word other religion, but we say religion of our neighbors. And so all those committee members at Vatican, they were so impressed by what I said. And then also in the Asia Archbishop meeting, I talked about the way we do conversations in a respected way. And I talked about this religion of neighbors. And so in that meeting, it became the official expression that was selected by the archbishops in that Asian meeting. And so peace
평평한 평자
means flat. In Chinese characters, it means flat.
퍼져나가는 모습을
And so the sound of the instruments spreads in a flat way. And then
화자
hua means
자가 모여서 화가 됐습니다. 평화. 아마 이것은
hua means combines the characters for grain and
인간의
mouth.
생존을 위해서는 뭐가 제일 중요합니까?
And so what is most important for the survival of humans? It
적어도
is
먹는 것에
food.
있어서는
And so when it comes to food,
공평하자.
we shall be equal.
생존을 위한 조건은
Because that is the condition for survival. We need to be in a flat way. We need to respect each other.
불평불만이 없고
And only then will we be able to avoid any complaints and we can see peace. It's not just about our survival, about eating. It is about that environment. And everyone belonging to that environment shall have equal lives. They shall not be discriminated.
항상 불평불만이 생기고
Because if someone is discriminated, they will have complaints, there will be conflicts, and that leads to war.
서양 언어에서의 평화는
Peace in the Western world or in the Latin world is called pax.
로마나
So it's called pax romana,
로마나
peace in Roma, or eirene.
박스라는 말은
But this word pax
계약이라는 말의 빡둠에서 나왔습니다.
comes from the word pactum, which means contract. Pactum
적대 세력 간의 합의에 의해서
refers to a pact where hostilities between enemies are brought to an end.
용어가 탄생했습니다.
And that is how the word peace is born.
서양의 평화와
And so the peace in the Western world
나라의 평화
and the concept of peace in our country and also the word peace in the Chinese world have different meanings.
그런 의미에서
And so from that regard,
그런데 아인슈타인은
but then Einstein said,
평화는 힘으로 유지될 수 없다.
peace cannot be kept by force.
그것은 이해에 의해서
It can
달성될 수
only be
있습니다.
achieved by understanding.
얘기를 했습니다. 힘으로써 평화가 이루어질 수
He
있는
said, peace cannot be kept by force.
또 미국 대통령이었던 우드로
And also, Woodrow Wilson, who was the president of the US, says that it shall be peace without victory.
장악한 그 권력이 평화가 되는 것은 아니다.
It's not that if somebody gains the power, that becomes peace. It's not about the balance of power. It's about sharing the power. It's not organizational competition, but it is peace, organizational peace. That is what
또 영국의
Wilson emphasized. And also, Thomas Hobbes
어떤가는 근본적 자연 법칙은
said that
평화를 추구하고 따르는 것이다.
pursuing peace is the best natural principle that we need to follow.
우리가 추구하는 것은
What we are pursuing is peace.
통일은 하나의
Unification is just a form of
통일한
peace.
다음에 평화가 없으면 그 통일이 무슨
After
의미가 있어요?
unification, if there's no peace, then is unification worth doing it? We need to have peace for unification. That is why we're talking about peaceful coexistence and peace.
에너지를 쏟아야 되지 않겠느냐?
We need to put all our energy into that effort. Thank you so much for your insightful words.
하나하나 마음에 다 와닿는 말씀이셨는데
All those words came to my heart, but then I thought, largely
그 평화론자 중에서
thinking.
평화로 이제 유명한 학자 중에서 요한 갈등 같은 경우
there's John Garton said that there is passive peace and active peace. When it comes to passive peace, it is about the balance of power. And then for active peace, it's about reconciliation, understanding, and trust between parties. And so, while listening to your words, it sounded like Asia wants to do more of the active peace, and in the Western world, they opt for the passive peace. But then in the beginning, you've said that in Korean, the meaning of peace is 어울림, to get together, to be in harmony, to believe in others, to have this trust. But I myself, I'm quite narrow-minded, and I have a very small heart. So then I was wondering, okay, maybe there are people that I cannot get together with, that I cannot mingle with. And maybe there are flowers, but there are also weeds at the same time. So that's what I thought. For instance, there might be people who have radical thoughts, and there are people who have hatred. We cannot get along with them. And then there might be those kinds of countries, those who are bad, and those who threaten world peace. And so we cannot find solidarity with those countries. So that's what we think sometimes. And so, Archbishop Kim, I was wondering what your thoughts are or what your teachings are about those aspects. Yes, I am also a person with limitations, but
자신을 바라보기보다는
rather than reflecting on ourselves, we are sometimes too much focused on others.
확대시키지 않는가? 자신의 결점은 핀셋으로 뽑을까 말까 하는 것으로 생각하고
We think that our weaknesses, our faults are too little, but then others have too many shortcomings.
자신을 정직하게 바라보는 사람은
But those who reflect on oneself in an honest way
할 용기가 없을
will not judge others that easily.
우리말에 높이 올라간다 할 때
In Korean, we say, if you go up,
무슨 자가 됩니까?
if you put that word upside down, do you know what that word becomes? It becomes
높게 올라가려면은
puk. So in order to go up,
높게 세우려면 어때요?
if you want to build a house, then you need to
넣어야 되지.
have a deep foundation,
정말 우리가
which means that
높게
if we want to become a noble person in terms of personality, we have to be humble. We have to be able to go down
정직하게 바라보는
and look upon ourselves with honesty. And only then will we not judge others that easily.
자기 결점을
Through the shortcomings of others, we can also see our own shortcomings. And that is why,
될 수 있지 않겠는가?
and only then can we correct ourselves.
감사합니다.
Thank you, Archbishop.
아까 전에 이제 쉬는 시간이거든요.
And earlier,
대담하기 전에
before
말씀을 하셨거든요. 어떤 말씀하셨냐면
we began our session, you've said that
그 상대방에 대해서 배려할 수 있는 것은 아닌가라고.
maybe the powerful people can care
그런 마음이
more
필요할 것 같습니다.
about the others. So I think we need to have that kind of a heart. Okay, that person doesn't like us, and rather than excluding them because they don't like us,
강한 그런 사람으로서
as a person who is strong inside out, so maybe we can embrace those who have different thoughts, who don't like us. So I think I've been talking in more abstract terms. So let us go into the details. And you've earlier talked about your visit to Vatican and also your visit to North Korea. So I would like to ask about those stories. So earlier you mentioned that in 2017, you went to Vatican to deliver the letter of President Moon, and that is how you open up the dialogue between North and South. And then in 2018 September, the third inter-Korean dialogue was held, and then you went to Pyongyang as a delegation. And so I think it was, so you were the president, so you met the president of the Chosun Catholic Committee, and you've talked about the inter-Korean relations, and you had actually made quite many outcomes. So I would like to ask about that experience. You visited North Korea, and through that process of dialogue, whether you had more trust about the Korean Peninsula and peace, or you thought that there are these walls still there, that there cannot be any dialogue between the two Koreas. So back then, I accompanied President Moon and visited Pyongyang, and we had luncheon there. And at that place, I wrote a small memo, and I wanted to deliver it to President Moon because President Moon and Kim Jong-un were having lunch at the same table. And because of protocol, I wasn't supposed to move during lunch. But I thought that was not important. I have to, because peace on the Korean Peninsula is more critical than me not being able to move. So I wrote a small note and said that, what about, and so maybe you shall invite Kim Jong-un. So I gave that letter to President Moon. And so I went to President Moon and delivered this note. And then President Moon delivered this message to Kim Jong-un, saying that maybe we can invite Pope Francesco. And Kim Jong-un said, if the Pope would be willing to visit, we would welcome him, fervently welcome him. That is how Kim Jong-un answered. And then for that, there were many efforts being made, and even now we are making efforts for the Pope to visit North Korea. However, it's not achieved yet. And the delegations of South Korea went to Paektu Mountain, and they were all at the Paektu Mountain site, and they were taking a picture. And the delegations, they were just busy taking their own pictures instead of taking the pictures of the president. And so the president and the ministers, they were ready to take a picture, but there was nobody there to take the picture. So then there was Kim Jong-un and his staff. They were all waiting there at the site. And so Kim Jong-un said, give me the camera, I will take the picture. And then the minister Do Jong-wan said, no, it's okay, we will take it. And so their staff took the picture. And so that was what happened.
And another episode that I remember is I told Kim Jong-un that because since Kim Jong-un lived in overseas for a long time when he was a teenager, so he experienced a lot. So he knows about tourism very well. So I told him, what if you can use your experience to develop your tourism industry? And he laughed at my comments. Well, I don't know if it was because of me, but I know that Kim Jong-un also developed their tourism site in Dalmaji, and I wish we all could go there one day. So if the South Korean government permits, maybe our citizen can be invited to North Korea to visit Paektu Mountain as well as the Dalmaji village. I think that could be a good start to resume our talk.
혹시 가시게 되시면 저도
Well,
한번
if you go there, can I come with you?
부탁드립니다.
Thank you.
그때 근데 갑자기 좀 드는 생각은 이제
Oh,
실제로 대화가
now,
된다라는 것을
while
느끼신
listening to
거잖아요.
you, so you felt that you were able to have conversation with him and you guys can understand each other. So I think that was the moments that you were able to think that actually we are the people who can make a conversation and understand each other.
저희 보통 사람들의 생각으로는 북한에 종교가
You know, like ordinary people like me think, is there a religion in North Korea? But there is actually a Catholic and also a churches and there is association. So my personal curiosity is, do they really go to church and can they pray, or is it just like a showpiece? It's just to show up. Well, there could be many opinions, but within a certain system or institution, they can go to church and they can have certain belief or religion. So I think there is no official church or official religion, but I think individuals can pray and individuals can have a religion. And I also myself went to there and I baptized one of the North Korean citizens as well. Okay, I see. So it's more like an individual religion, right? Okay, so you visited North Korea in 2017, and it seems like it was a very peaceful moment. But sometimes, you know, we experience failure, or we sometimes see that it's not easy to recover the two Korea's relations. Like what I remember is the Hanoi and the U.S. and Hanoi summit that was ended without a deal. And I think it was 2020 when North Korea exploded liaison that was placed in Kaesong Industrial Complex at the time, and it was really sad because what I thought was, is it because of the failure of the Hanoi summit? So I was thinking for about past 6 years, since the failure of the Hanoi summit, North Korea has walked a path far removed from peace. And they are continuing to resist Korea, and they also enacted an act that doesn't allow North Korean citizens to see Korean culture, which is Anti-Korean Culture Act. So having a look at the past 6 years, their actions have indeed left the South Korean people disappointed and wounded, I would say. But still, do you believe it is meaningful to resume dialogue at this moment? And how should we respond to North Korea? Well, I think the most important thing is not to give up. Personally, you know, by individuals, they could have different thoughts or different environments, so they can have different views on a specific target. But we have been divided for longer than 80 years, and we had totally different environment and totally different ideology, different thoughts. So I think it's a hubris to think that we can change North Korea. I once said human rights issues in North Korea. So regarding human rights issues in North Korea, it is very regarded sensitive in our religion, in Catholic. So we are really interested in human rights issues in North Korea. However,
동시에 대립할 때
when
어떤 것이
the matter of
우선권을
survival and matter of human rights
어떤 것이 우선권을 가지고 있어요?
come into a conflict, what could be more important? What do you think? Is survival important or human rights important? I would say survival.
살수 없는 상황에
You have to
생존의
live.
가치가
You have to
있습니다.
survive. If you cannot survive, human
그래서
rights
저는 그런
doesn't
얘기를
mean anything. It's
우리가
meaningless.
북한의 식량을 제공하고
So, in that sense, we try to provide food to North Korean citizens, and we really would like to cooperate with North Korea, but that is to create an environment where their human rights can be meaningful. If they cannot eat, if they don't have food, if they cannot survive, talking about human rights is meaningless.
불공평하지 않냐? 그렇게 단세포적으로
So,
얘기하는 것은 아닌 것 같다.
I think it's not a simple question to say which one is more important. So before thinking about that, I think we need to carefully look at their history, background, and their environment. History is something that reflects our today. By having a look at our history and the past, we can think about our present and we can make a prospect for our future. So in that sense,
우리 기준과 우리 가치관을
I don't think we should force them to understand our thoughts or our ideology. And also, vice versa. We should not think that we can change them. And another thing that is important at this stage is that we have to restore mutual trust between the two Koreas. There are something we are missing because every time our government changed our policies towards North Korea changed as well. So I also made some promise to North Korea, like let's do this and let's do that. It would be good for both democracy and for your regime. And we were pursuing that together. But when the president of South Korea changed, everything went to zero base. So actually, for North Korea, it would be hard for them to trust us. And I understand why they always say that they cannot trust us. So I think we need to start from a very careful approach. Yeah, I remember you talked about it during your keynote address. Of course, it is important to see who is to blame and who started this, but with only that, we cannot make a progress. That was your point from your keynote address. Well, actually, I think it's in alignment. I think it's the same. Well, when we ask people which one is more important, whether the survival is important or human rights, well, in Korea, maybe we could pursue a national interest rather than survival or human rights issue, but because you maybe have more experience than I do, and because you served as a leader of a certain religion, you have different understanding, and you told us that we should take a different approach. So I would like to go further. You said we need to build mutual trust, but reality, I keep thinking, can we, South Korea, trust North Korea? Well, trust here should be mutual. You know, we should trust them and they should trust us. So I keep thinking that our system in the two Koreas are too different because they do have their own system, which is more authoritarianism. So they pursue their system to be maintained, for their regime
그래서 이런 생각이 듭니다. 혹시 우리가
So what I
말하는
am
평화랑 북한이
thinking
말하는
is
평화가 다른 것은
maybe
아닐까라는 생각이
peace
듭니다.
we are pursuing could be
우리가 말하는
different here in
평화는
Korea and there in
대립과
North Korea.
긴장의 완화,
There could be
분쟁의
some
종식 같은 걸
discrepancy in
평화라고
understanding
생각하는데 혹시 북한이 말하는
peace.
평화는
So I would like to
권력의
ask,
영속적인, 영구적인 지속 상태를 평화라고 말하는 것은
are
아닐까?
they
그렇게 생각이 자꾸
saying maybe
이런
long-lasting
현실적인 상황에서
regime, their
우리가
own
과연
regime could be
상호
peace
신뢰를
for them?
바탕으로 하는 치유와 화해를 말하는 것이 의미가
So
있을지
do you think
아니면
is it
차라리 현실을 좀
meaningful
직시하고
for
압도적인
us
힘에
to
의한 평화를 그냥
discuss
유지하는 것이 더
peaceful
나을지
coexistence or
그런
peaceful
세속적인 삶의
unification?
접근성에 자꾸 갈등이 되는 것 같습니다. 그래서 대주교님의 견해
That's my concern. What's your view?
수능이 끝난 지가 오래됐는데 저는 계속
Well,
수능을 보는 것 같습니다.
actually, I feel like I'm writing a college entrance exam. It was like ages ago, but I still feel like I am writing this exam.
그러나 답답하면서도
Well,
포기할 수 없는 게 우리
it's
민족의
also very, feel stuffy, but we have to resolve. So we have to be patient and we have to continue.
말을 안 듣는 자녀들이 고집세
You know, at your household, let's say
엄마한테 대들 때 그래 네
your
알아서 해라.
children don't listen to
내버려
mom,
두니까
you.
그래도
If you're a
같이 우리가
mom,
노력하지 않습니까?
will you abandon them because they
이유가
do not listen to you?
맞는다고는
No,
생각하지 않습니다만
you
그래도
won't.
같은
Well,
민족으로서
this
우리가
example might be wrong, but what I would like to say is because we same the same
빨리 가지
blood,
혼자 가라.
so I think we need to be patient and we should go together. In Africa, there is a saying, if you want to go far,
우리는
you
함께
have to
가야
go
될
together.
민족 공동체입니다.
We are
그래서 비록 우리가
a one nation
짜증나고 답답하고
that shares history.
우리 후손을 위해서라도 우리가 우리 시대에
A lot of you or a lot of us could feel that it is
더 좋은
very
날이 있을 것을
constrained,
우리가 희망하면서
but we will have to hope for a brighter future and move forward all together and be
하늘은
patient.
스스로 돕는 자를
And
돕는다.
we all know that
주변 국가들이 우리를 도와주는
we all know saying heaven helps those who helps
그러나
themselves.
진정으로 우리가 힘 있는
So
나라가
what
되기
I would like to
원하는
say
나라는 몇 나라일까요?
is there are not many countries who want
민족이
South Korea or North Korea to do well, So
기다리면서 우리가
of course many countries seems to prioritize their own interest
하는 것은
first in their policy making. However,
함께 할 수 있는 일부터 우리가
I think ultimately when we Koreans can truly work together and prepare together, then only then will help and support of neighboring countries be effective.
저도 잘
Okay, I
모르겠지만
understand.
북한에 대해서 공부하면 공부할수록
Well,
이건 안
the more I
되겠구나
study about North Korea, the more I think,
문제점을
is
찾는
it
게 참 쉽다는
possible?
생각이 듭니다.
Because it's actually easy to find what's the problem or what's the culprit. But
그래서 쉽게 그렇게 부정적으로 안 될 수밖에 없는 거구나. 복잡한 문제.
I become more negative.
그러면 사실 아무것도 못 한다는 생각이 듭니다.
And sometimes I think there is nothing we can do.
경제에서 어떤 사람이 야 이렇게 해야지 뭐
And there is a very similar examples in economy.
그러면 사실
like,
아무것도 하지 못하는
If somebody says that, oh, you can't do this, and this person will really become to
말씀해 주셨던 것처럼 큰 가치가 필요한
not to do that. So I think what's important is to set up a common goal and value, even it's far away. But I think we should approach to that value and to that goal together. So in that sense, your remarks are really valuable. And one more question. So, we are totally separated, the two Koreas.
But I think it's also because of the international orders. because of the war in Russia and Ukraine, and I think North Korea has more options. And also, according to the Kyoto communication or news, with North Korea visiting China for its Victory Day, it is persuading Russia and China, saying that we are two hostile states and that there will no more be peace on the Korean Peninsula. So that's what I read from the article from Japan. And also, he's also mentioned about the new Cold War diplomacy. And even until now, they are not responding to any of our North Korea related policies. So some say that we need to prepare for this cold kind of a coexistence. So we are coexisting without any dialogue or conversation, and we need to be satisfied with this situation. So, Archbishop, you're saying that that shouldn't be the case, that we need to lead and have more communication, that there's a way to go. So can I ask you a more concrete question? What can we do to revive that channel of communication in order to overcome this situation? What can we do? So I don't know if this wording would be the right one to say, but let's say, for instance,
그 언동에 대해서
about the rhetorics of the politicians,
무슨
and
말을 했느냐가 중요한 것이 아니라
it's not important what they said, but
정치인들이 해야 할 말을 어떤 말을 안 하고 있느냐.
it's about what they are not saying, although they should be saying those words. So I think that is the key.
북한이 겉으로 얘기하는 말과
The words that North Korea is speaking out to the
하고
world,
싶지만 안 하고 있는 말과
and their words that they're not able to speak out, although they would like to, we need to distinguish those words and then receive
그런 면에서
or understand what they're trying to say.
공개적으로 북한이 얘기했던 그 말 이전에
And so before thinking about the words that were actually spoken out by North Korea, but we should first understand the real situation in North Korea. Then I think we can untangle these issues. So when we solve an easy problem,
선다형 문제를
when we have to just choose out of 4 options, and let's say if we face a difficult problem, what do we do? Do we stick and hold on to that problem? No, we just skip that problem and move on to the next. And we start solving the easy ones. And then, if we have time left, then we come back to this difficult problem and try solving it. And I think this applies to the North Korea and South Korea relations. What can we do immediately? We need to think about what can we do immediately. For instance,
북한의 지하자원과
let's say North Korea has a lot of underground resources. It has tourism resources, and also has excellent labor force. And also, Korea has semiconductor and medical devices,
전력 나누어 쓰기
and also power sharing.
문제부터 우리가 함께하는
And so these maybe easier problems can be tackled first.
의해서가 아니라
It's not because we need to do so, it's because North Korea needs them and wants them. And so let us try to focus on their needs and begin with that approach.
힘을 내세우는
And rather than just emphasizing our self-esteem, I think that's a luxury because it's about our nation. Although it might hurt our self-esteem, but for the future of our nation and community, if we do something first, then our descendants will one day say that our ancestors has done a great job.
좋은 말씀이신 것 같습니다. 아까
That's a very good point. You've also mentioned about the Kalma
북한도 필요하고
tourist site,
도움이 되는 것들.
that what North Korea needs and wants. So for instance, we can create some tourist related products
우리가 함께 공동으로
or some resources that we could share. And so let's do what we can do in the beginning. And then I have an additional question.
어떻게 보면 크게 국가가 할 수 있는 일을 계속 말씀해 주셨는데
So you've talked about the things that the government or the country can do, but what about at the personal level? Let's say we're just individuals.
평화나 대화와 협력을 위해서
And so thinking about unification, dialogue, communication, what can we do as individuals?
개인의 선한 의지와
I think this good commitment and that noble spirit shall not be given up, and we should aim for solidarity. And that's how we can take part in this process.
예를 들면 한번 그런
For
일이
instance,
있었습니다.
there was
우리가
this episode
쌀을 북측에 전달하고자 할 때
when we were to deliver rice to North Korea, but then we were not able to do so because that was violating the sanctions of the UN.
의견을 주고
And the religious leaders have been exchanging views saying that the cars cannot go there because of UN sanctions.
우리 시민들이
So then, what about
쌀
us, people?
메고
Take a sack of rice and then go to Panmunjom. And so hundreds of people took a sack of rice and went to Panmunjom to deliver that rice to North Korea, and that became like a global news. And so if we have the commitment of the people, then we can, although there are many limitations and constraints, it's not that we take the citizens, but the citizens voluntarily gather those opinions, and it's like a civic movement. Maybe they can initiate those kinds of moves.
이 질문을 해도 되나 말까?
I'm not sure if I can ask this question or if I should ask this question, but maybe yes, if I could.
기도를 하면은
So if we pray, could God help us?
틀림없이 저는 믿습니다.
I believe that He will help us.
그래서 우리 가톨릭 교회에서는
And so in our Catholic Church,
밤 9시에
every evening at 9 p.m., we pray for peace. We pray for reconciliation of the two Koreas. Every 9 p.m., we have a prayer for the two Koreas because Germany also, for many decades, at 12, at 6, 6 in the morning, 12 p.m., and 6 p.m., people have been praying for the unification of the two Germanys for many decades. And we can also think about that as well. And Germany, or East Germany, for the restoration of East Germany, the money was held in the Swiss account. And so if East Germany needed that money, they just had to fill out the form and they could take out and withdraw the money from the Swiss account. And so when we say helping North Korea, we should refrain from saying that we just give and pour our money to them, but let's think that we are doing this for the sake of peace.
질문 왜 드렸냐면은
So I asked this question because
사실 내 일이 아니다라는 생각을 많이 하게 되거든요.
people might think, I mean, this is not really relevant to me. The government will do it anyway.
말씀하셨던 것처럼 그 옳은 방향을 갖고 있는 개인들의 연대가 필요한 것 같아요.
But then, as you say, we need the solidarity of the right-minded people. And so even if the individuals can't do much, but hoping for peace,
그 사회 역할을 하고 있는 것은
that already is, I think, contributing to the society. That is why I asked this question.
아닙니다. 뭐 말씀하시는 것 같아가지고.
I thought you wanted to say
지금
something
이제
else.
한반도의 평화에 대해서
Yes, and now
제한적으로 좁게 이제 남과 북의 관계에 대해서 좀 질문을 드렸었는데
I've asked the questions about the North and South relations, but now I think when we talk about Korea or Korean Peninsula peace, we talked about peace between the two Koreas. But now Korea has become a global economy. So let us expand the horizon of the questions and let us talk about peace of the region and Northeast Asia.
남과 북에 대한
These days, the younger people
관심이 전혀 없는
people are not really interested in the unification or peace. And according to statistics, 60% of the younger generation, they are not interested in unification.
부정적이라고
And I don't think that this is just negative because some people might think
젊은 사람들이
the younger generation these days, when it comes to security, they are not interested at all and they are naive. There are some who think like that, but I don't think that's the case. It is the emergence of a new generation.
이념과 가치보다는
And so rather than thinking about the values and ideology, they are thinking more about the pragmatic sides. And so they think that we're not really focused on North Korea. It's not that we can gain from North Korea. And that is why in this small region called Korean Peninsula, maybe they are now looking outwards outside of the country. And that is why they are less interested on the Korean Peninsula issues and unification.
평화적 관계라고 할
And so when we talk about the peace-based relations of the Korean Peninsula, there might be US, Southeast Asia, Europe. So I think that thinking more about the relations with those regions and countries. So the question is like this. Earlier, you mentioned that you watch YouTube, that you do social networking service, but I think it's, a chaos. And so content is being sold. Content based on hatred becomes fun. People are laughing about those contents. And with the development of internet and social networking service, we thought that the world will become a more diverse place, but now we're seeing more in-depth confrontations between generations, between sexes, and between people and regions. I think this has become a trend. And so in this chaos, how can we talk about peace? How can we implement peace? I was wondering about that, so that's my question. Have you seen any of those contents based on hatred, ignoring Japanese people, ignoring Chinese people? And so do you get those algorithms? Or on your algorithms, it's just about good contents? No, I get all of the algorithms. So have you seen those kinds of contents? Yes, I should see them. It's not like I like them. So yes, I think you need to discern carefully. So through watching YouTube, I believe that we can also spread positive effects. I hope that we can also engage in those civic movements. There was a pharmacist in the suburban region, and my friend went to that pharmacy and said, "When I heard your voice, I thought that you were a very young woman, but then that very old a pharmacist gave like a small bottle of vitamin to him because she was so happy hearing that her voice sounded so young. And then when another patient comes in, then that pharmacist will be very friendly again. And when she goes home, she will be very friendly to her family, to her children-in-law. But then if someone would tell her, 'Miss, you look very old,' all of a sudden, then what will happen? She will be very, frustrated. She will no longer be that friendly to her patients or guests. And then what happens? This will be like a chain effect. So if you throw a small pebble into the lake, and then there will be a wave. And just like that, this influence will spread. In order for us to spread that goodwill, and for instance, like you, Mr. Che, you have a great influence on the people. And so what about you contribute to spreading goodwill? And we need to believe in the power of solidarity, because even if I do much, don't think that, it's useless if I'm the only one doing this. But if you have a group of friends doing the same thing, being together, being in solidarity, doing something together, then that will become much more powerful. The candlelights together become a torch, and then becomes a pillar of fire. And a small candlelight can be put off easily, but a stronger fire will not be put off that easily. So our goodwill shall be spread through solidarity, and then can we do something big within the society? And we've experienced that last year. Through the candlelight revolution, we were able to see that we can change the path of our country. We were able to see how strong our civic movement can be. And so last November in Seoul, when I was ministering the service, I told the younger generations, thank you so much. Because with this good heart, good will, good conscience, all of you came together, and with that kind of a solidarity, can we exercise more power, and we can change our society, our nation. That's what I think. And not only that, it's not only about our country, but it's also about those countries that are in more vulnerable situations, like Africa, like Latin America, like Southeast Asia. We also need to think about those countries to make sure
선도적인 역할을 할 수
that
있는
we play a leading role for global prosperity.
감사합니다.
Thank you.
개인적으로는 어떻게
Well,
생각하시나요?
what's your personal view
인터넷이나 SNS를
on
보면
like those content on social media?
어떻게 역사에 대해서
Like
나쁜 감정을
sometimes,
가졌던 세대는 점점 지나가고 서로 교류하는
you
젊은
know, we are
세대들의
seeing the
완전히
generation, older generation who had bad feelings in past is not using social media that often, but now we are seeing new generation. But do you think social media affects the people's thoughts? So what I am thinking is
점점 안 좋아진다. 인류가 안 좋은 방향으로
our
간다는
humanity
생각이
is going to a wrong
대표적으로
direction.
어떤 관점을 갖고 계세요? 세상이 그래도
Do you
우리가
think
점점 선의 방향으로
are
나아간다고
we
생각하시나요?
going to a right
이게
path?
대세다. 이게 점점 안 좋아지는구나.
So,
그런 생각을 가지시는지
or
그냥 개인적으로 좀
do you
궁금합니다.
think same as me?
역사 발전의 과정을 보면은
Well, when we look back at our history, there were ups and downs,
멈춰지는 것은 아니고
but it did not stop.
저는 부분의 진실을 확대 재생산해서 그것이
So sometimes a partial
하는 것은
event or a partial
안 좋은 것이라고 생각합니다.
story of a certain history could be
어떤 것을
exaggerated,
보더라도 우리가
and I don't think that's the right thing. So what's important is that the public and we have to be able to
그대로 믿어서는 안 되겠다.
identify which is the factually correct and which is factually incorrect.
사실을 확인해서
So I suggest that we always check on whether it is true or not. If we don't do that, maybe we could be seduced by fake news. And there was one time I also experienced that. What was that? It was a news about some country, and this content was criticizing that country. But after I found out that it was a partial story of that country, so that was not
사건이 크게 보도되는 거고 그다음에
the truth
적인 게 귀에 더 크게 들리는 거니까
of the country.
단순히 그런
I understand. So,
나빠지고 있다라고
yeah, by having a look at a small part from an SNS or social media, we can define a certain topic as it is bad or good. Okay, and another thing I would like to
영성 생활과
ask you is that I saw your interview and you mentioned that you would like to make a community where we can all live together equally and respected.
하셨던 거죠. 근데 이 얘기를
And
인터뷰를 보면서 지금 우리는
you said you hope to create a faith community where spiritual life and daily life are united.
영성과 일상이
And
하나가 되어야 되는 것처럼
if we connect your remark to the peace on the Korean Peninsula, what do you think? Well,
내적인 평화가 일치되어야
it's true that external peace, such as diplomatic peace, must align with internal peace, built on mutual trust.
서로를 혐오하고 불신하는 오늘날에
But
평화에 대한
today,
기대가 요원한
we're
것
living in the world where
사람과
we
사람
see so
사이에
much
신뢰를 회복할
hatred
수 있는 길이 무엇인지
and distrust to one another.
구체적으로
So could you tell us how we can restore mutual trust for among people? Could you be more in detail? Like how we can trust people? Today, trust between people are lost and the path forward seems distant. So please tell us, how can we restore trust between people?
어려워지네요.
The question is getting even more difficult.
사실 이것은 아마 지구가 끝날 때까지 풀리지 않을 겁니다.
Well, this question will be questioned until the end of our planet.
그것은 개인 간에도 그렇고
So, of course, between individuals, between communities, we will experience the same.
구체적인
There should be
본적인
There's trust issues everywhere. But what I would like to say is that we should not be misguided by a fact that is not true. Everyone in the world has weakness. So I would say we are all same. You might think that, oh, Kim Hee-jung, he is an archbishop, so he must be very kind. But I'm not. I also sometimes want to curse others and want to think about others in a negative way. I also do that. So I am a human. We're all human. So to answer your question, I think it's really a difficult question to answer. But I would suggest you have to be honest. And you must be honest when you look at yourself and reflect on yourself. Okay, being honest. And you'll find yourself angel side or evil side of yourself. And actually, to restore this issue, we should start seeing ourselves honestly, right? Okay, let me move on to the last question. So your exam will soon end. Okay, my last question is regarding your remark that you mentioned earlier. So you said the trust between the two Koreas cannot be made because of the change of our government. So sometimes, depending on which government is ruling the country, our unification policy could be changed. I think it's a big problem because in order for us to lead this peaceful unification, we should be able to persuade other countries, other neighboring countries. But are we really able to persuade China, Japan, and other countries? So this is my last question. How we can overcome our differences in social and our belief and a lot of differences, and how we can overcome these differences and form a consistent policy towards North Korea. What could be fundamental values should we guide us? It makes me blank. Well, actually, you've already answered, but last but not least, could you finalize this discussion? Well, I would say that we should set our goal more further, and we need to look further. If we look just down, we can't make a progress. And if we can look further altogether, at least we will be able to know which direction we're going. And I really hope that our citizens can have the same thoughts and we can agree with one another and look for the future altogether. Not only those people who are interested in unification should pursue for our brighter future, but I think ordinary citizens or other people who are disinterested in unification should also pay more attention to unification and work together towards peaceful unification, which means that we should look further and we should also act well, and we should look carefully at our attitude so that our neighboring countries can join us in setting up our goal together. I think it was about 4 years ago in Washington, D.C. I visited that forum, and I met one of the officials of the U.S. government who was Korean. And
결국 그 기간 동안 북한의 핵을 개발하는 시간만 벌어주지 않았어.
he was criticizing that we've done nothing. Like over the 70 years, the only thing that North Korea did was to develop their nuclear weapon. So
친구로 만들 수 있는 방향은 없냐?
what he said to me was, how can you guys become friends? Instead of persuading them to give up their nuclear weapon, maybe you guys can become friends.
갈수 있도록 또 아니면은 저기 베링 해협을 통해서 시베리아 횡단에서
So
북한까지 올 수 있도록
that was a suggestion. And maybe we can also construct a railroad that crosses the Korean peninsula, and that will also allow us to cross Siberia.
한번 그렇게 해보자.
And
그렇게 하면은 세계 젊은이들이
younger generation will be able to travel the Korean peninsula. And if that happens in reality, maybe we can bring back peace on the Korean peninsula. They can mingle together
누가 당신들의
through
이런 생각을 맡고 있느냐?
traveling the Korean peninsula.
추측한다. 한반도가
That's what I
막히면
thought.
손해볼 사람이 미국에서 누구겠느냐?
And
그 사람들이 맡고 있는 거 아니냐? 어쩌면 그 사람들이 가장 큰 힘을 가지고 있다
maybe
미국에서.
I think the US is the most powerful nation that can do something about the Korean peninsula. That's what I thought at the time. So I would like to wrap up here, but I think we need to have hope for tomorrow. I think we have about only a few minutes. Can I give one more question, or can I get some question from the floor? Because we are running out of time.
저는 항상 실리적으로 보고
Well,
이해관계로 보고
actually, throughout my whole life, I've been always pragmatic, and I always wanted to live for my own life and my own interest.
멀리 볼 수 있는 그 안목을 잊고 살았던 것은 아닌가.
So maybe I was too focused on my life only, but we're left with one more minute. So my one last question is, now we should pursue for the peaceful unification. And would you like to say something to our citizens? Well, peaceful unification. I would rather talk about our daily life.
어떤 상황에서도 여러분들의 꿈을 포기하지 마십시오.
No matter
어떤 분야에서
what, don't give up on
실패는
your
하나의
dreams.
과정일 뿐입니다.
Failure is just a
어둠
process.
속에서도 잠들지 않는
Dream does not sleep,
별입니다.
even in darkness.
희망은 삶의 빛입니다.
And hope
희망은
is the light.
실패하는 데서 끝나는 것이 아니라 포기하는 데서
Hope
끝납니다.
does not end with failure, but it only ends when we give up.
뜻이 있으면 길이
So
있습니다.
never give up.
여기 계신 모든
If you're
분들이
willing to do something,
꿈과 희망을
there shall be
포기하지 않고
path.
원하는 것을 꼭
So I
이룰 수
hope
있기를
all
간절히
you
바랍니다.
can dream and make your dream come true.
내용을 정성껏 들어주셔서
Thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
여기까지 대주위원님 모시고 깊은 가르침
Thank you very
마치도록
much.
하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
So we will wrap up here. Thank you very much.
네, 대담에서 좋은 의견 나눠주신 두 분께 다시 한번
All right, this concludes our plenary session, and please give them a big round of applause once again.